So I want to give you a tour of the Paleo Approach. The introduction starts with some basic autoimmune statistics. One of the things that the introduction contains is a complete list of all of the suspected and confirmed autoimmune diseases. There's over 140 diseases in this list. It takes up 3 pages because also many autoimmune diseases go by multiple names. The first part of the book talks about whys, the contributors to autoimmune disease. This starts with a description of how the immune system works and what goes wrong in autoimmune disease. There's actually this great table that describes the role of all of the major cell types within the immune system, so that as you read through the rest of the book, you can come back to this table and remind yourself of the role of that particular cell to help put the entire book into context in terms of understanding why certain diet or lifestyle factors are important in autoimmune disease. After explaining how the immune system works, the book talks about the other contributors to autoimmune disease. While this book is focused on diet and lifestyle, autoimmune disease also requires genetic predisposition, and there's a variety of other environmental triggers that would include things like infections, chemical or toxic exposure, hormones, certain drugs, and all of that is discussed in this chapter. This chapter also introduces the link between autoimmune disease and leaky gut and gut dysbiosis and what those actually are. It also describes the known mechanisms of how different foods we eat can actually cause increased intestinal permeability, which can lead to what's called leaky gut syndrome. And this is entirely based on what is known in the scientific literature right now. Chapter 2 really focuses on what diet factors contribute to autoimmune disease. And it doesn't actually start with leaky gut. In fact, it starts with nutrient deficiencies, because there is a very, very strong link between a variety of nutrient deficiencies and autoimmune disease. These tend to be the nutrients that we know have roles in regulating the immune system, and also the nutrients that are most deficient in a standard American diet. After talking about the importance of various essential nutrients, this chapter goes on to talk about increased intestinal permeability and gut dysbiosis, both of which are linked to autoimmune disease, and what compounds in our foods can contribute to that. I actually go into quite a lot of scientific detail about exactly how these compounds increase intestinal permeability and damage the gut barrier, and where genetic predisposition is required for that to happen, and where we just don't know, or we know that that likely happens in all individuals. This is the section that also starts to include lists of foods to avoid, and also talks about compounds that can act as adjuvants or stimulators of the adaptive immune system. The next subsection in Chapter 2 is related to foods that stimulate inflammation. And this really comes to the part where it's really difficult to regulate the immune system and get the immune system to stop attacking our bodies if we are stimulating inflammation. This talks a lot about sugars and omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid ratios, along with a few other important contributors to inflammation. Hunger hormones are also discussed in this chapter because a variety of hunger hormones, or hormones that regulate the feeling of hunger or the feeling of satiety, are also immune regulators. And so regulating these hunger hormones is really important in regulating the immune system. And it's not just about what we eat, although that affects hunger hormone regulation quite substantially, but also how much we eat and when we eat. The next chapter is the lifestyle chapter, and it really talks about the intersection between various lifestyle factors such as stress, circadian rhythms or disruption in circadian rhythms, sleep, and activity, and where those interact with the immune system. There's actually a surprisingly large body of evidence showing just how important it is to prioritize regulating these lifestyle factors. So, reducing stress, managing stress, increasing sleep, getting the right kinds of activity, and getting lots of the right kinds of activity. This chapter also talks about medications, some that can be counterproductive in your efforts to heal, but it also discusses situations where these medications can be life-saving, and I definitely recommend always discussing any change in medication, whether it's prescription or over-the-counter medications, with your doctor before making those changes. Chapter 4 discusses the history of these recommendations and where they come from. Chapter 5 is the first chapter in part 2, which is really the how-to chapter. Instead of focusing on what can contribute to autoimmune disease and therefore what we should avoid, this really focuses on what to do. Chapter 5 talks about the Paleo Approach diet, or the autoimmune protocol. It includes complete food lists and also a variety of discussions on food quality, what to do if you are trying to make these changes to your diet on a tight budget, and a variety of related issues. For example, FODMAPs are discussed in this chapter. Blood sugar regulation is discussed in this chapter. Spices, what to drink, and then a variety of food frequently asked questions. At the end of this chapter, the food lists are repeated for easy reference, and then these are also repeated again in the appendices. Chapter 6 is the lifestyle how-to chapter, and this includes a variety of ideas of how to reduce stress, manage stress, support digestion. A lot of these strategies come from gut-brain axis connection problems, all, again, supported with scientific research. Discusses increasing activity or mild to moderate activity in your life. Chapter 7 really talks about implementation. It talks about transition. It talks about how you might feel the first month. There's a variety of frequently asked questions that are addressed in this chapter as well, such as gaining weight if you're underweight or losing weight if you're overweight, practical implementation, certain modifications for kids and pregnant or lactating women, and just a variety of things that might crop up as you're trying to implement the recommendations in this book. Chapter 8 is the troubleshooting chapter. This includes a variety of topics. It starts with supporting digestion, since you can end up in a vicious cycle where you're not absorbing the nutrients from your food because your digestion is hindered, and that is then in turn hindering your ability to regulate the immune system and heal the body. Other really important topics that are discussed in here is conventional treatments for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. A lot of conventional treatments are discussed in this chapter, as well as supplements that may be helpful, and supplements that may actually be counterproductive. There's many supplements that we think are safe that we just go and take that actually, if you have an autoimmune disease, may be stimulating your immune system. Food allergies and intolerances are discussed in more detail in this chapter, including histamine sensitivity, salicylate sensitivity, and sulfite sensitivity. A variety of other important issues that might come up that might be things that are slowing down your healing are discussed here as well. This page shows all of the supplements that are discussed in this chapter, just to get a sense of how important this may be for some people. There's also this checklist. So if you've been following the Paleo Approach for a few months and you're not seeing the results that you think you should be, this may be very, very helpful for narrowing in on exactly where you need to focus additional efforts, which might include supplements or conventional medicine treatments. Chapter 9 is the long haul, focusing on sustainability. This is the chapter that discusses food reintroductions, how to reintroduce them safely, as well as suggested priorities for reintroductions. Another frequently asked question is, when I follow an elimination diet, why do I react so violently to a food that I used to consume all the time? That's discussed here. And then there's some things to keep in mind as you move forward once you're seeing, benefits from following the diet and lifestyle recommendations in this book. What do you then do over the long haul? There's a glossary of terms, which may be very helpful for people getting through the more scientific chapters. There's summary guides that include all of the food lists that are discussed throughout the book, so it's all in one place for easy reference. Selenium health benefit values of fish and shellfish, which are also discussed in Chapter 5. And then there's nutrient tables. These are taken from the USDA database, and it's the vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, including fiber and sugars, fats, and amino acids of all of the foods that are in the USDA database that are recommended foods for eating on the Paleo Approach. This is designed to be here to help people target whole food strategies for addressing diagnosed micronutrient deficiencies. So if you know, for example, that you're deficient in zinc, you can go through these tables, find the foods that are rich in zinc, and focus on consuming more of those. Whole food sources of micronutrients are always a safer way to address nutrient deficiencies than supplements. But again, this should always be discussed with a healthcare professional. Lots of nutrient tables. Look at them. I think it's 20 pages or something. Then there's the scientific references that are used to formulate all of the recommendations in this book. Every single sentence comes from the scientific literature. So this is there for anybody who wants to go back to the original research. Then there's a really awesome index. And finally, a preview of the Paleo Approach cookbook with a few of my favorite recipes just to get you started while you wait for the cookbook to come out in May. And that is a very brief tour of a very big book. I hope you're excited to read it. It's going to be in bookstores January 28th, The Paleo Approach by Sarah Ballantyne.